I was folding my late husband's shirts when I heard it through the baby monitor I didn't know was there. The flannel still smelled like Robert's cologne, even after 8 months. Old Spice and sawdust. I was standing in our bedroom, the bedroom where we'd spent 43 years of marriage, running my fingers over the worn fabric when their voices crackled through the small white device on the nightstand. I hadn't put it there. "Mom's losing it, babe. Did you see her at breakfast? She put salt in her coffee instead of sugar." My son Daniel's voice, cold as January wind. "Another year, maybe less, and we can get her declared incompetent. The house, the money, the life insurance payout, all ours." My daughter-in-law Jessica's laugh came next. Sharp. Cruel. "Your senile little mother won't know what hit her. 2.3 million and this gorgeous house? We deserve it after putting up with her sad widow act for months." I stood there, Robert's favorite shirt clutched in my trembling hands, and for the first time since burying my husband, I smiled. They had no idea who they were playing with. "My name is Margaret Chin. I'm 70 years old. I live in Fairfax, Virginia, in the 4-bedroom colonial house my husband bought when Daniel was just a baby. To my son, to my daughter-in-law, to everyone in this quiet suburban neighborhood, I'm just a grieving widow. A confused old woman who sometimes forgets to turn off the stove, who repeats stories at dinner, who cries when she finds her husband's reading glasses. But that's only half true. What they don't know, what I've never told Daniel, is that before I became a stay-at-home mother, before I dedicated my life to raising him and supporting Robert's accounting firm, I was Margaret Chin, Assistant U.S. Federal Prosecutor for the Eastern District of Virginia. For 12 years, I put away mobsters, corrupt politicians, white-collar criminals who thought they were untouchable. I built cases that were ironclad. I cross-examined witnesses until they broke. I was known in the courthouse as the Iron Lotus, beautiful, composed, and absolutely deadly in a courtroom. I gave it all up when Daniel was born. Robert and I decided one of us should be home full-time, and his career was already established. I didn't regret it. Not for 1 second. I loved being Daniel's mother. I loved our quiet life. But I never forgot how to fight. I picked up the baby monitor, a cheap model from Target, the price tag still on the bottom, and carried it downstairs. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My mind was already working, cataloging evidence, building a strategy. In the kitchen, Jessica was loading the dishwasher, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing the Lululemon outfit I'd bought her for Christmas. She looked up and smiled. That practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "Margaret, I was just cleaning up from lunch. You barely touched your sandwich. Are you feeling okay?" I set the monitor on the kitchen counter between us. Her smile froze. "I'm feeling much better now, actually," I said softly. "Tell me, Jessica, when exactly did you plant this? Was it last week when you insisted on organizing my bedroom? Or the week before, when you said you wanted to clean the ceiling fans?" The color drained from her face. Her mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult my intelligence." I pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down, folding my hands on the table like I used to do in interrogation rooms. I heard everything. Every single word. Daniel's plan to have me declared incompetent. Your excitement about inheriting $2.3 million. Your comments about my senile behavior. Jessica's jaw tightened. The mask slipped. I saw the real person underneath, calculating, cold, desperate. "You're confused, Margaret. You're not well. Maybe we should call Dr. Patterson." "I'm not confused," I interrupted. "I'm not senile. And I'm not the helpless old woman you think I am." She crossed her arms. "Then what are you?" I smiled. "I'm the person who's going to destroy you." The words hung in the air between us. Jessica laughed, but it sounded nervous. You can't do anything. You're 70 years old. You have no money of your own. Robert controlled everything. You have no power. No connections. You're alone, Margaret. And when Daniel gets home tonight, I'm going to tell him you're having paranoid delusions. We'll have you evaluated by a psychiatrist. We'll have you declared incompetent by Christmas. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. You can't stop this. You already lost. I stood up slowly, picking up the baby monitor. We'll see about that. I walked out of the kitchen, climbed the stairs to my bedroom, and closed the door. Then I opened my closet, pushed aside the boxes of Robert's belongings, and pulled out the locked filing cabinet I'd kept hidden in the back corner for 30 years. Inside were my old case files, my bar association credentials, my contact list from the prosecutor's office. And at the very bottom, in a sealed envelope, was something I'd never told anyone about. Not even Robert. The real reason I left the prosecutor's office. What was coming next would change everything. But first, I needed to know exactly what Daniel and Jessica had been planning. And I needed proof, the kind of proof that would hold up in court. Because if there's one thing I learned in 12 years of prosecuting criminals, it's this. The best revenge isn't hot and impulsive. It's cold, calculated, and absolutely airtight. That night, I made Daniel's favorite dinner. Pot roast with carrots and potatoes, the same recipe I'd been making since he was 5 years old. I set the table with the good china, lit candles, and waited. He came home at 6:30, Jessica trailing behind him. My grandson Tyler, 6 years old with Daniel's dark eyes and Robert's gentle smile, ran ahead and threw his arms around my waist. Grandma. We went to the park, and I went on the big slide. I hugged him tight, breathing in the little boy smell of grass and sunshine. Tyler was innocent in all this. Whatever happened, I had to protect him. That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. Go wash your hands for dinner. He scampered off. Daniel kissed my cheek, the same way he always did, as if nothing had changed, and Jessica's smile was perfectly in place again. They were good actors. I'd give them that. Over dinner, I played my part. I repeated a story about Robert that I'd told last week. I forgot Tyler's teacher's name. I got confused about what day of the week it was.
And I watched.
I watched Jessica's eyes light up every time I forgot something. I watched Daniel exchange glances with her, small nods of confirmation. I watched them build their case against me, moment by moment, not realizing I was building mine against them. After Tyler went to bed, I excused myself early. I'm so tired lately. I think I'll turn in. Of course, Mom. Daniel's voice was so kind, so concerned. You rest. We'll clean up. I climbed the stairs, went into my bedroom, and waited. 30 minutes later, I heard them in Daniel's old room across the hall, the guest room where they'd been staying temporarily for the past 4 months. I'd planted my own baby monitor in there yesterday, hidden inside the teddy bear on the dresser. Their voices came through clear as crystal. She's getting worse, Jessica said. Did you see her at dinner? She told that same stupid story about Robert's fishing trip 3 times. I know. Dr. Patterson's appointment is next week. I'll mention the memory issues, the confusion. He'll document everything. What about the lawyer? I called Richard Morrison this morning. He says if we can get 2 doctors to confirm dementia or incompetence, he can fast-track the conservatorship. 6 weeks, maybe 8, and we'll have complete control of her finances. My jaw tightened. Richard Morrison. I knew that name. He'd been a defense attorney I'd crushed in court 28 years ago in a fraud case. Apparently, he was still representing criminals, just a different kind now. And if she fights it? Jessica's voice was worried. Daniel laughed. Mom? Fight? She's a 70-year-old widow who hasn't worked in 40 years. She doesn't even have her own bank account. What's she going to do? I opened my laptop, the one Daniel thought I barely knew how to use, and started making notes. Richard Morrison. Dr. Patterson. 2 doctors for evaluation. Conservatorship timeline. 6 to 8 weeks. I needed more. Over the next 3 days, I became a ghost in my own house. I listened. I watched. I documented everything. I discovered that Jessica had been going through my mail, intercepting bank statements. She'd already contacted Robert's life insurance company twice, asking about the payout timeline. She'd even taken photographs of the house's interior. For the future sale, I overheard her tell a friend on the phone. Daniel had been more careful, but not careful enough. I found a folder on his laptop. He left it open in the kitchen while he showered, titled Mom's Finances. Inside were spreadsheets. The house value, $890,000. Robert's life insurance, $1.2 million. Savings accounts, $180,000. Investment portfolios, $340,000. He'd calculated everything down to the last dollar. There was also a document called symptomslog.docs. I opened it. My hands started shaking as I read. September 15th. Left stove on for 3 hours. Had to remind her twice. September 22nd. Forgot grandson's name. Called him Robert. September 29th. Put milk in the pantry, cereal in the fridge. October 6th. Couldn't remember how to work the TV remote. Every single symptom was fabricated. I'd never left the stove on. I'd never forgotten Tyler's name. They were building a fictional case against me, brick by brick, lie by lie. But 2 entries caught my eye. September 14th. Switched Mom's blood pressure medication with aspirin. She hasn't noticed. October 1st. Replaced her multivitamins with sugar pills. Want to see if health declines. They weren't just lying about my mental state. They were sabotaging my physical health. I sat in the kitchen, staring at that screen, and felt something I hadn't felt in 30 years. The cold, focused rage that used to fuel my prosecutions. The kind of anger that doesn't explode, it calculates. I took photos of everything with my phone. I forwarded the documents to an encrypted email address I'd set up. I cleared the browser history and closed the laptop exactly as Daniel had left it. Then I called someone I never thought I'd call again. The phone rang 3 times before a gravelly voice answered. Whoever this is, it's Saturday morning, and I'm trying to enjoy my coffee. Hello, Marcus. Silence. Then, Margaret? Margaret-chan. It's been a long time. Marcus Williams had been my investigator at the prosecutor's office. The best in the business. He'd retired 5 years ago, but I'd kept his number, just in case. 30 years, he said slowly. I thought you'd vanished off the face of the earth. What's wrong? You only call when something's wrong. I told him everything. The baby monitor. The medication switching. The conservatorship plan. He listened without interrupting, the way he always had. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Your own son? Yes. And you want me to? I want you to investigate them. Deep background. Financial records. Phone records. Everything. I need to know if there's more I don't know about. And Marcus? I need it to be airtight. Like the old days. Exactly like the old days. He sighed. I'm 73, Margaret. I was enjoying retirement. I'll pay you double your old rate. I don't need money. I need a reason to get out of bed in the morning. When do you need this? Yesterday. He laughed, that same bark of amusement I remembered from 100 late nights building cases. Give me a week. And Margaret? It's good to hear your voice. Even if the circumstances are shit. Good to hear yours too, old friend. I hung up and sat in the dark kitchen, listening to the sounds of my son and his wife sleeping upstairs in the house I'd raised him in. They thought they were hunting me, but the truth was much simpler and much more dangerous. I'd spent 12 years of my life learning how to destroy people who thought they were untouchable. And I was about to remember exactly how to do it. I became the role they wanted me to play. It's a strange thing pretending to lose your mind. You have to be convincing enough that they believe it, but not so convincing that real damage is done. It's a performance that requires precision, and I'd cross-examined enough lying witnesses to know exactly how it's done. On Monday morning, I forgot to get dressed. I came downstairs in my nightgown at 9 a.m., looking confused. Jessica found me standing in the living room, staring at Robert's empty armchair. "Margaret, are you okay?" I blinked at her slowly. "Where's Robert?" He said he'd be home for breakfast. Her eyes gleamed with something ugly. Triumph, maybe. Robert passed away, remember? 8 months ago. I let my face crumple, let tears slide down my cheeks. No, that can't be right. He was just here yesterday. We were talking about repainting the kitchen. Jessica put her arm around me, guided me to the couch. Her voice was syrupy sweet. "You're confused, Margaret. It's okay. These things happen. Why don't you rest here? I'll make you some tea." While she was in the kitchen, I texted Marcus, playing the part. "They're eating it up. Any progress?" His reply came instantly. "Financial records are interesting. Stand by." I deleted the messages and slipped my phone under the couch cushion just as Jessica returned with chamomile tea and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Here you go. Drink this. You'll feel better." I took the cup with shaking hands and sipped obediently. Over her shoulder, I saw Daniel watching from a hallway, his phone out. He was filming me. Good. Let him. That afternoon, Dr. Patterson made a house call. I'd known James Patterson for 15 years. He'd been Robert's doctor too. He was a kind man, competent, but I knew he'd document what he saw objectively. I made sure he saw plenty. I called him Dr. Roberts. I couldn't remember what year it was. Asked if Robert was feeling better, insisted I'd seen him that morning. Daniel sat in on the examination, interjecting with helpful information. "She's been like this for weeks, document getting worse. Last Tuesday, she tried to drive to the grocery store and couldn't remember how to start the car. We found her in the garage, crying." That was a lie. I hadn't tried to drive anywhere. But Dr. Patterson wrote it down. "I see," he said gently, shining a light in my eyes. "Margaret, do you know what month it is?" I hesitated, like I was searching for the answer. "April." "It's October, Margaret." "Oh." I let my voice tremble. "I'm sorry. I'm so confused lately." After the examination, Dr. Patterson pulled Daniel aside. I listened from the hallway. "Your mother is showing signs of cognitive decline. It could be early-stage dementia, or it could be severe depression and anxiety following your father's death. I'd like to refer her to a specialist for a full neurological workup. Of course, whatever she needs." Daniel's voice was the picture of concern. "We just want what's best for her." Liar. That evening, after Jessica put Tyler to bed, I heard them celebrating in the kitchen. "Patterson's hooked," Daniel said. "He's documenting everything. The referral to the specialist is perfect. That's the second doctor we need for the conservatorship." "How soon can we move?" "Morrison says 4 weeks if the specialist confirms decline. We'll have control of everything by Thanksgiving. New Year's at the latest." Jessica's voice dropped lower. "What about Margaret? What happens to her when we take over?" "There are very nice assisted living facilities. We'll find something affordable." "Affordable? We're not spending a fortune on her care when we could be using that money ourselves." "She'll be fine. 3 meals a day, activities, other old people to talk to. She'll probably be happier. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. They were planning to warehouse me in the cheapest nursing home they could find while they spent my husband's life insurance on themselves. My phone buzzed. Marcus, call me.
Now.
You need to hear this. I slipped out the back door into the October darkness and called him from the garden where Robert and I used to sit on summer evenings. Tell me you have something, I said. Oh, I have something. Multiple somethings. First, Jessica's real name isn't Jessica Morrison. It's Jessica Kowalski. She changed it 8 years ago after a fraud conviction in Illinois. She scammed elderly people out of their savings by posing as a financial advisor. My blood ran cold. She has a criminal record? Served 2 years, got out on good behavior. She met Daniel 6 months after her release. I'm guessing she didn't mention that during their courtship. What else? Daniel's in debt. Serious debt. He owes $340,000 to various creditors. Credit cards, a failed business investment, a loan from, let's call him an informal lender who charges informal interest rates. The kind of guy who breaks kneecaps when payments are late. My son, my beautiful boy who I'd raised to be honest and kind. When had this happened? When had he become this person? There's more, Marcus continued. I pulled their phone records. Jessica's been in contact with Richard Morrison for 3 months since June. 2 months before Robert died. What? Margaret, I think they planned this. I think they've been planning this since before Robert passed. The garden spun around me. I grabbed the bench for support. Are you saying they? I'm not saying anything yet. But I am saying that I pulled Robert's death certificate. Cause of death. Massive heart attack. But I also pulled his medical records. He had no history of heart disease. His cholesterol was fine. His last physical 3 months before he died showed a perfectly healthy man. Marcus, what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that you hire a lawyer. A very good lawyer. And I'm suggesting that you might want to consider having Robert's body examined. The phone nearly slipped from my hands. You think they murdered him? I think it's worth investigating. And I think you need to be very, very careful. If they killed Robert for money, and if they think you're standing in their way. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I sat in the garden for a long time after we hung up, staring at the house where I'd raised my son. The house where my husband died. The house where I was supposed to grow old in peace. Robert's heart attack had been sudden. He'd been working in his study, and Jessica, who'd stopped by for lunch, found him collapsed on the floor. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. Jessica was the one who found him. Jessica, whose real name was Kowalski, who'd served time for defrauding elderly people, who'd been in contact with a lawyer 2 months before my husband conveniently died of a heart attack he shouldn't have had. I thought about the medication they'd switched, the pills they'd replaced with sugar, how easy it would have been to slip something into Robert's coffee that afternoon, something that would mimic a heart attack, something that would be gone from his system before anyone thought to test for it. The back door opened. Daniel stood silhouetted in the light.
Mom?
What are you doing out here? It's cold. I looked at my son, this stranger wearing my son's face, and smiled vaguely. I was just talking to your father. He likes it out here. Daniel's expression shifted to concern. Mom, Dad's not here. Remember? Come inside. You'll catch cold. He put his arm around me, so gentle, so caring, and led me back into the house. The house where my husband might have been murdered. The house where they were slowly poisoning me. The house where I was going to bring everything crashing down around their ears. But not yet. Not until I had every piece of evidence I needed. Not until the trap was perfect. Because if there's one thing I learned in 12 years of prosecuting killers, it's this. You only get one shot at justice. and I wasn't going to miss. The neurologist's office was in a medical building downtown, all glass and steel and expensive art on the walls. Daniel drove, Jessica in the passenger seat, me in the back like a child being taken to the dentist. They'd scheduled the appointment with Dr. Sarah Brennan, a specialist in cognitive disorders. According to her website, she was one of the top neurologists in Virginia. According to Marcus's research, she was also thorough, ethical, and not the type to rubber stamp a diagnosis for money. That made her perfect for my purposes. In the waiting room, I continued my performance. I picked up a magazine and held it upside down. I asked the receptionist 3 times what we were there for. I called Daniel Robert once, then corrected myself with convincing confusion. Jessica squeezed Daniel's hand. They thought they were winning. Dr. Brennan was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a bun. She reminded me of myself 30 years ago, competent professional, not easily fooled. She conducted a standard cognitive assessment, memory tests, problem-solving tasks, questions about orientation and recall. I failed exactly enough to be concerning, but not enough to be obvious. It's a delicate balance. You want to appear impaired, but not so impaired that they question why you're still functioning independently. Can you tell me what year it is, Margaret? It's 1998? No, wait. 2015. It's 2023.
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry. But when she asked me to remember 3 words, apple, table, penny, and recall them 5 minutes later, I made a calculated decision. I remembered all 3 perfectly. Her eyebrow raised, just slightly. She made a note. After the cognitive tests, she did a physical neurological exam. Reflexes, coordination, eye movements. All normal because there was nothing wrong with me. I'd like to speak with Margaret alone for a few minutes, she told Daniel and Jessica. I saw Jessica's face tighten. We should stay. She might get confused. I appreciate your concern, but I always do a portion of the evaluation in private. It's standard protocol. You can wait right outside. They had no choice but to leave. Once the door closed, Dr. Brennan turned to me, and her entire demeanor changed. All right, Mrs. Chen. We're alone now. Would you like to tell me what's really going on? I blinked at her. I don't know what you mean. You remembered those 3 words perfectly. Your recall is excellent. Your problem-solving on the cognitive tests was deliberately inconsistent. You missed easy questions but got difficult ones correct. And unless I'm very mistaken, you just executed a fairly sophisticated performance designed to mimic early-stage dementia while maintaining enough function to avoid serious concern. She leaned forward. I've been doing this for 25 years, Mrs. Chen. I know what real cognitive decline looks like. And I know what a very intelligent woman pretending to be confused looks like. So I'll ask again. What's really going on? For a long moment, I said nothing. This was a risk. If I told her the truth and she told Daniel, my entire plan would collapse. But I've always been good at reading people. And I saw something in Dr. Brennan's eyes that I recognized, a woman who'd spent her career fighting for truth. If I tell you, I said quietly, it stays between us. Doctor-patient confidentiality. Of course. I told her everything. The baby monitor, the switched medications, the conservatorship plan, Robert's suspicious death, my background as a prosecutor, the case I was building. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with every detail. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and was quiet for a long time. My God, she finally said. Your own son. Yes. What do you need from me? I need a clean evaluation. I need you to document that my cognitive function is normal for my age. I need evidence that I'm not incompetent. And I need you to not mention any of this to Daniel or Jessica. She nodded slowly. I can do that. But Mrs. Chun, if what you're telling me is true, if they're poisoning you and potentially murdered your husband, you're in serious danger. You should go to the police. Not yet. I need more evidence. I need this to be ironclad. You're talking like a prosecutor. I was a prosecutor. She smiled slightly. I believe it. All right. I'll write up my evaluation. Completely normal cognitive function, no signs of dementia or significant decline. Likely experiencing grief-related depression and anxiety, which is entirely normal given your loss. I'll recommend continued monitoring, but no intervention required. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If they're determined to have you declared incompetent, they'll just find another doctor who'll give them the diagnosis they want. Let them try. Every doctor who says I'm fine is more evidence in my favor. She stood, opened the door. Daniel and Jessica practically fell into the room. Well, Daniel asked, how is she? Dr. Brennan's professional mask was flawless. Your mother shows some signs of grief-related confusion and depression, which is entirely normal given her recent loss. However, I found no evidence of dementia or significant cognitive impairment. Her memory, reasoning, and judgment are all intact. Jessica's face fell. But she can't remember what year it is. She forgot my name yesterday. Grief can manifest in many ways, Dr. Brennan interrupted smoothly. Difficulty with attention and concentration, temporary memory lapses, these are all normal responses to trauma and loss. I'm not concerned at this time. I'd recommend continued monitoring and perhaps some grief counseling, but no medical intervention is necessary. I watched Daniel's jaw tighten. This wasn't what they wanted to hear. Are you sure? He pressed. Maybe we should get a second opinion. Of course, that's always your right. But I'm confident in my assessment. Your mother is a sharp woman, Mr. Morrison. She's not incompetent. Morrison. She deliberately used Jessica's fake name. I caught the tiniest hint of a smile at the corner of her mouth. In the car on the way home, the temperature was icy. That was a waste of time, Jessica muttered. She doesn't know what she's talking about. We'll find another specialist, Daniel said. Someone more understanding of the situation. I sat in the back seat, looking out the window, and smiled. That evening, I had another visitor. I'd scheduled it while Daniel and Jessica were out with Tyler at soccer practice. The doorbell rang at 7. I opened it to find a man in his late 60s, tall and lean with white hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Mrs. Chen, please come in, James. The neurologist's office was in a medical building downtown, all glass and steel and expensive art on the walls. Daniel drove, Jessica in the passenger seat, me in the back like a child being taken to the dentist. They'd scheduled the appointment with Dr. Sarah Brennan, a specialist in cognitive disorders. According to her website, she was one of the top neurologists in Virginia. According to Marcus's research, she was also thorough, ethical, and not the type to rubber stamp a diagnosis for money. That made her perfect for my purposes. In the waiting room, I continued my performance. I picked up a magazine and held it upside down. I asked the receptionist 3 times what we were there for. I called Daniel Robert once, then corrected myself with convincing confusion. Jessica squeezed Daniel's hand. They thought they were winning. Dr. Brennan was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a bun. She reminded me of myself 30 years ago, competent professional, not easily fooled. She conducted a standard cognitive assessment, memory tests, problem-solving tasks, questions about orientation and recall. I failed exactly enough to be concerning, but not enough to be obvious. It's a delicate balance. You want to appear impaired, but not so impaired that they question why you're still functioning independently. Can you tell me what year it is, Margaret? It's 1998. No, wait. 2015. It's 2023.
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry. But when she asked me to remember 3 words, apple, table, penny, and recall them 5 minutes later, I made a calculated decision. I remembered all 3 perfectly. Her eyebrow raised, just slightly. She made a note. After the cognitive tests, she did a physical neurological exam. Reflexes, coordination, eye movements. All normal because there was nothing wrong with me. I'd like to speak with Margaret alone for a few minutes, she told Daniel and Jessica. I saw Jessica's face tighten. We should stay. She might get confused. I appreciate your concern, but I always do a portion of the evaluation in private. It's standard protocol. You can wait right outside. They had no choice but to leave. Once the door closed, Dr. Brennan turned to me, and her entire demeanor changed. All right, Mrs. Chen. We're alone now. Would you like to tell me what's really going on? I blinked at her. I don't know what you mean. You remembered those 3 words perfectly. Your recall is excellent. Your problem solving on the cognitive tests was deliberately inconsistent. You missed easy questions but got difficult ones correct. And unless I'm very mistaken, you just executed a fairly sophisticated performance designed to mimic early-stage dementia while maintaining enough function to avoid serious concern. She leaned forward. I've been doing this for 25 years, Mrs. Chen. I know what real cognitive decline looks like. And I know what a very intelligent woman pretending to be confused looks like. So I'll ask again. What's really going on? For a long moment, I said nothing. This was a risk. If I told her the truth and she told Daniel, my entire plan would collapse. But I've always been good at reading people. And I saw something in Dr. Brennan's eyes that I recognized, a woman who'd spent her career fighting for truth. If I tell you, I said quietly, it stays between us. Doctor-patient confidentiality. Of course. I told her everything. The baby monitor, the switched medications, the conservatorship plan, Robert's suspicious death, my background as a prosecutor, the case I was building. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with every detail. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and was quiet for a long time. My God, she finally said. Your own son. Yes. What do you need from me? I need a clean evaluation. I need you to document that my cognitive function is normal for my age. I need evidence that I'm not incompetent. And I need you to not mention any of this to Daniel or Jessica. She nodded slowly. I can do that. But Mrs. Chen, if what you're telling me is true, if they're poisoning you and potentially murdered your husband, you're in serious danger. You should go to the police. Not yet. I need more evidence. I need this to be ironclad. You're talking like a prosecutor. I was a prosecutor. She smiled slightly. I believe it. All right. I'll write up my evaluation. Completely normal cognitive function. No signs of dementia or significant decline. Likely experiencing grief-related depression and anxiety, which is entirely normal given your loss. I'll recommend continued monitoring, but no intervention required. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If they're determined to have you declared incompetent, they'll just find another doctor who'll give them the diagnosis they want. Let them try. Every doctor who says I'm fine is more evidence in my favor. She stood, opened the door. Daniel and Jessica practically fell into the room. Well, Daniel asked, how is she? Dr. Brennan's professional mask was flawless. Your mother shows some signs of grief-related confusion and depression, which is entirely normal given her recent loss. However, I found no evidence of dementia or significant cognitive impairment. Her memory, reasoning, and judgment are all intact. Jessica's face fell. but she can't remember what year it is. She forgot my name yesterday. Grief can manifest in many ways, Dr. Brennan interrupted smoothly. Difficulty with attention and concentration, temporary memory lapses, these are all normal responses to trauma and loss. I'm not concerned at this time. I'd recommend continued monitoring and perhaps some grief counseling, but no medical intervention is necessary. I watched Daniel's jaw tighten. This wasn't what they wanted to hear. Are you sure? He pressed. Maybe we should get a second opinion. Of course, that's always your right. But I'm confident in my assessment. Your mother is a sharp woman, Mr. Morrison. She's not incompetent. Morrison. She'd deliberately used Jessica's fake name. I caught the tiniest hint of a smile at the corner of her mouth. In the car on the way home, the temperature was icy. That was a waste of time, Jessica muttered. She doesn't know what she's talking about. We'll find another specialist, Daniel said. Someone more understanding of the situation. I sat in the back seat, looking out the window, and smiled. That evening, I had another visitor. I'd scheduled it while Daniel and Jessica were out with Tyler at soccer practice. The doorbell rang at 7. I opened it to find a man in his late 60s, tall and lean with white hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Mrs. Chen, please come in, James. The exhumation was approved within a week. James filed the petition with a judge who remembered me from my prosecutor days, Judge Catherine Walsh, now in her 70s, but still sharp as ever. When she saw my name on the filing, she called James personally. Is this really Margaret Chen? The Margaret Chen? The same. Tell her I'll review this petition personally. If there's even a hint of foul play, I want to know about it. 3 days later, the order came through. Robert's body would be exhumed for a full forensic toxicology analysis. I didn't tell Daniel or Jessica. I didn't have to. They'd find out soon enough. They found out on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table when Daniel came thundering down the stairs, a legal document in his hand, his face red with rage. What the hell is this? I looked up from my tea. Good morning, Daniel. What's what?
This.
He slammed the paper on the table. A court order to exhume Dad's body? For toxicology testing? Mom, what are you doing? I set down my cup carefully. I'm finding out the truth about how your father died. He died of a heart attack.
We all know that.
The doctors confirmed it. The doctors confirmed he had a cardiac event. They never tested for substances that could cause cardiac events. Jessica appeared in the doorway, still in her bathrobe. Margaret, this is insane. You're disturbing Robert's peace because of some paranoid delusion. Am I? I looked at her directly for the first time in weeks without the vague, confused expression I'd been wearing. Or am I investigating a suspicious death? Something flickered across her face. Fear, maybe. There's nothing suspicious about it. He had a heart attack. It happens. It happens, I agreed. Especially when certain drugs are introduced into the system. Drugs that stop the heart but break down quickly. Drugs that wouldn't show up in a standard autopsy unless specifically tested for. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. Daniel's voice dropped dangerously low. Mom, you need to stop this. You're not well. You're confused. We've been trying to help you, but if you keep fighting us, you'll what? I stood up, and for the first time in months, I let them see the real me. No confusion. No trembling. Just cold, clear rage. You'll have me declared incompetent? You'll take control of my finances? You'll warehouse me in some cheap nursing home while you spend my husband's life insurance. Daniel's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Their voices filled the kitchen. Every word of their conspiracy. Every cruel plan. Every calculated lie. Mom's losing it, babe. Another year, and we can get her declared incompetent. Jessica lunged for the phone, but I pulled it away. That's illegal, she hissed. You can't record us without consent. Actually, in Virginia, I can. It's a one-party consent state. And I'm one party. I smiled. You'd know that if you'd bothered to research the law before committing multiple felonies in my house. Felonies? Daniel's voice cracked. Mom, you're being ridiculous. Medication tampering is a felony. Fraud is a felony. Conspiracy to commit conservatorship fraud is a felony. And if the toxicology report shows what I think it will show, murder is definitely a felony. Jessica's mask finally shattered completely. You can't prove anything. You're a senile old woman with paranoid delusions. No court will believe you. I walked to the kitchen drawer and pulled out a folder. I laid it on the table between us. This is your real criminal record, Jessica Kowalski. 2 years in Illinois for defrauding elderly people of their savings. This is Daniel's debt history, $340,000 owed to various creditors, including a loan shark who's been calling his cell phone twice a day for the past month. I pulled out more documents. These are the phone records showing you've been in contact with Richard Morrison since June, 2 months before Robert died. These are the medical records showing Robert had no history of heart disease. These are the emails I found on Daniel's laptop detailing your entire plan to have me declared incompetent. Daniel was backing away, his hands up like I was pointing a gun at him. Where did you get all this? How did you? I'm Margaret Chen, I said softly. For 12 years, I was an assistant U.S. federal prosecutor. I built cases against people far more sophisticated than you. Did you really think I wouldn't know how to investigate my own son? The color drained completely from Jessica's face. You were a prosecutor? I was. And I'm about to be one again. Only this time, you're the defendants. Daniel sank into a chair, his head in his hands. For a moment, I saw the boy I'd raised. The boy I'd loved. And my heart broke all over again. Why? The word came out broken. Why, Daniel? I loved you. I gave you everything. Why would you do this to me? He looked up, and his eyes were wet. The money. I needed the money. I made bad investments. I owed people who would kill me if I didn't pay. And Jessica said, she said it would be easy. That you were old anyway. That you wouldn't even know what was happening. And Dad. My voice was barely a whisper. Tell me you didn't kill your own father. Silence. Long and terrible. Then Jessica spoke, her voice flat. He was going to change his will. He found out about Daniel's debts. He was going to cut him off completely, leave everything to charity. We couldn't let that happen. The room spun. I gripped the counter to stay standing. What did you give him? Digoxin. From my aunt's prescription. She had heart problems. Just a few pills dissolved in his coffee. He never felt a thing. Daniel made a choking sound. Jessica, shut up. Just shut up. Why? She turned on him, venomous. It's over. Your mother has everything. We're done. She looked at me with pure hatred. You know what? I'm glad. I'm glad we tried to get rid of you. You're a miserable old woman living in the past, clinging to a dead man's money. You don't deserve any of it. Daniel deserves it. He's your son. He was my son. I interrupted, my voice ice. The son I raised would never have murdered his own father, would never have poisoned his own mother. The person standing in front of me is a stranger. I picked up my phone and dialed. It rang twice before Marcus answered. It's time, I said. They just confessed to everything. On tape. Police are already on their way. I've been listening to the whole thing through your phone connection. Should be there in 3 minutes. I heard the sirens in the distance. Daniel started to cry. Real tears. The kind he used to cry when he was little and had broken something precious. Mom, please.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Don't do this. Please. Part of me, the mother who'd bandaged his scraped knees and scared away his nightmares, wanted to reach for him, wanted to forgive him, wanted to pretend none of this had happened. But the prosecutor in me, the woman who'd spent 12 years seeking justice for victims, knew what had to be done. I gave you everything, I said quietly. My career.
My time.
My love. And you thanked me by murdering your father and trying to destroy me. There's no coming back from that, Daniel. There's no forgiveness for that. The sirens were closer now. Red and blue lights flashed through the kitchen windows. Jessica bolted for the back door, but I'd locked it earlier. She screamed in frustration, pounding on the glass. Daniel just sat there, broken, as the police came through the front door. Margaret Chen. The lead officer was young, maybe 30, with kind eyes. That's me. These are the suspects. Daniel Morrison and Jessica Kowalski. You'll want to arrest them for conspiracy to commit fraud, medication tampering, and murder. I have full confessions recorded. I handed him my phone with the audio file queued up. As they read Daniel and Jessica their rights, as they put the handcuffs on my son's wrists, I felt Tyler's arms wrap around my waist from behind. Grandma? What's happening? Why are the police taking Mommy and Daddy? I knelt down to his level, this innocent child caught in the crossfire of adult evil. Your parents made some very bad choices, sweetheart. They hurt people. And when people hurt others, there are consequences. Are they going to jail? Yes. For how long? I looked at Daniel being led out the door, his head down, his whole body shaking with sobs. For a very long time. Tyler was quiet for a moment then. Are you going to be okay, Grandma? I pulled him close, breathing in the little boy's smell of shampoo and innocence. Yes, baby. I'm going to be okay. And so are you. I promise. As the police cars drove away with Daniel and Jessica in the back, I stood on the porch of the house where I'd raised my son, holding his child, and felt something I hadn't felt in 8 months. Not happiness, not satisfaction, but a grim kind of peace. Justice wasn't always sweet. Sometimes it tasted like ashes, but it was still justice. And that was enough. For now, that had to be enough. The toxicology report came back 3 weeks later. I was sitting in James Sullivan's office, a corner suite in downtown Fairfax with walls lined with law books and framed victories, when he opened the envelope. His face was grave as he read. Digoxin, he said quietly. Exactly as Jessica claimed. Levels consistent with acute poisoning. The medical examiner says it would have caused cardiac arrest within 30 minutes of ingestion. Robert never had a chance. I'd known it was coming. I'd heard Jessica's confession myself. But hearing it confirmed, seeing it in black and white on official letterhead, made it real in a way that shattered something inside me. My husband had been murdered. By our son. And his wife. James poured 2 glasses of whiskey from the bottle he kept in his desk drawer. You need to drink this. I did. It burned going down, but it helped. What happens now? I asked. Now? Now, we destroy them. He opened a file folder 6 inches thick. The district attorney is salivating over this case. First-degree murder, conspiracy, fraud, elder abuse. It's a prosecutor's dream. They're charging Daniel and Jessica as co-conspirators. If convicted, they're both looking at life without parole. And Tyler? James's expression softened. The boy? He'll go into foster care temporarily while the courts determine permanent placement. But Margaret, you should know, you have the strongest claim for custody. You're his grandmother, you have stable housing and income, and most importantly, you've already demonstrated that you're willing to protect him from his parents. I thought about Tyler. 6 years old. Innocent. About to lose both parents to prison because of their own evil choices. I want him, I said. I'll raise him. I'll make sure he knows his father wasn't always a monster, that there was good in him once. I'll file the paperwork. Over the next month, the case built itself. Marcus's investigation had uncovered even more than we'd suspected. Daniel's debt wasn't just from bad investments. He had a gambling problem, online poker, sports betting, slot machines at the casino. He'd lost over $400,000 in the past 2 years. The loan shark he owed was a man named Viktor Sokolov, who had connections to organized crime. Jessica's past was even darker. The fraud conviction in Illinois was just the tip of the iceberg. Marcus found 2 other identities she'd used, 2 other elderly victims she'd scammed. She'd been running this con for a decade, moving from state to state, changing her name, always targeting widows and widowers with money. She'd met Daniel at a grief support group 6 months after his father's death. Only Robert hadn't been dead yet. She'd been planning ahead, targeting her next mark. The medication tampering was documented extensively. Marcus had the pill bottles tested. My blood pressure medication had indeed been replaced with aspirin, my vitamins with sugar pills. Over time, this would have caused my blood pressure to spike, potentially causing a stroke or heart attack that would look natural. But the worst discovery came from Robert's computer. 2 weeks before he died, Robert had emailed his lawyer, not Richard Morrison, but his longtime attorney, Frank Chen, no relation, asking about changing his will. He'd discovered Daniel's debts. He'd confronted Daniel, who'd promised to get help for his gambling addiction. But Robert didn't believe him. He wanted to protect me, to make sure I'd be financially secure even if Daniel continued down his destructive path. The email read, "Frank, I need to revise my will immediately. I want everything to go to Margaret, with Daniel receiving only a small trust that disperses monthly. I love my son, but I can't enable this addiction. Can we meet this week?" The meeting never happened. Robert died 2 days later. Frank came forward as soon as he heard about the murder charges. He provided the email, along with notes from a phone conversation where Robert had expressed fear that Daniel might do something desperate if cut off financially. He knew. I whispered to James when he showed me the email. Robert knew Daniel was dangerous. He was trying to protect me, and they killed him for it. The preliminary hearing was set for December. Daniel and Jessica were both denied bail, flight risks, the judge ruled, given Jessica's history of identity fraud. I attended every hearing, sat in the gallery, made sure they saw me. Jessica's defense attorney tried to claim she'd been coerced by Daniel, that she'd been afraid of him, that she'd only gone along with the plan to protect herself. The jury of public opinion wasn't buying it. Daniel's attorney went with diminished capacity, claimed Daniel had been suffering from depression and addiction, that he wasn't in his right mind when he'd conspired to murder his father. James tore both defenses apart in pretrial motions. "Your Honor," he argued, "the evidence shows months of careful planning, detailed financial spreadsheets, coordinated efforts to gaslight and poison Mrs. Chen, the obtaining of prescription medication to use as a murder weapon. This wasn't impulse. This wasn't diminished capacity. This was calculated, cold-blooded murder and conspiracy." The judge agreed. Both defenses were substantially weakened before trial even began. Meanwhile, I focused on Tyler. The court granted me temporary custody pending the trial's outcome. I enrolled him in therapy, a child psychologist who specialized in trauma. I kept his routine as normal as possible. School, dinner, bedtime stories, the same rhythms I'd used with Daniel 35 years ago. One night, as I was tucking him in, Tyler looked up at me with those solemn dark eyes. "Grandma, why did Daddy hurt Grandpa?" I'd been dreading this question. But children deserve truth, even when it's painful. "Your daddy made very bad choices," I said carefully. "He was in trouble, and instead of asking for help, he tried to fix things in the wrong way. He forgot that the people who love you are more important than money. Do you still love him?" The question pierced me. Did I? Could I love the person my son had become? "I love the little boy he used to be," I said honestly. "I love the person he was supposed to become. But the man he became, the man who hurt people, I don't know if I can love that person. Does that make sense?" Tyler nodded slowly. "I think so." "I'm sad, Grandma." "Me too, baby. Me too." He fell asleep holding my hand, and I sat there in the dark, thinking about the cycles of love and betrayal, of how we hurt the people closest to us, of how justice sometimes means destroying your own child to protect the truth. The trial was scheduled to begin in January. James assured me we had an airtight case. The confessions alone were enough, but combined with the toxicology report, the financial records, the emails, the medication tampering, it was overwhelming. They'll try to plea bargain, he predicted. No sane lawyer would take this to trial. He was right. 2 weeks before jury selection, Daniel's attorney approached with a deal. Daniel would plead guilty to voluntary manslaughter and conspiracy to commit fraud in exchange for a 25-year sentence with possibility of parole. James brought the offer to me. "What do you think?" he asked. I thought about Robert, about how he'd died thinking his son would take care of me, about the last 8 months of being slowly poisoned, gaslit, driven toward insanity by people I'd trusted.
No deal, I said.
I want a trial. I want everything public. I want the world to know what they did. Margaret, trials are unpredictable. There's always a chance. No deal, I repeated. They showed no mercy to Robert.
They showed no mercy to me.
Why should I show them mercy now? James nodded slowly. All right, we go to trial. But Jessica's attorney had other ideas. And what happened next would turn the case, and my life, in directions I never could have predicted. Because in the game of justice, the only thing more dangerous than the crime itself is the desperate criminal with nothing left to lose. The courthouse was packed on the first day of trial. It was January 15th, cold enough that my breath fogged as I climbed the steps. Camera crews lined the sidewalk. The case had attracted national attention. Son and wife accused of murdering father, poisoning mother for inheritance, made for sensational headlines. I wore my best suit, navy blue, tailored, professional. The same kind of suit I used to wear when I was the one prosecuting cases. James walked beside me, his hand steady on my elbow as reporters shouted questions. Mrs. Chun, how do you feel about your son being on trial? Mrs. Chun, will you be testifying? Mrs. Chun, do you think they'll be convicted? I said nothing, just kept walking, eyes forward, until we were inside the sanctuary of the courthouse. The courtroom was beautiful in that austere way government buildings manage. Dark wood paneling, high ceilings, the seal of Virginia mounted behind the judge's bench. I took my seat in the front row of the gallery, directly behind the prosecution's table. Daniel and Jessica were led in separately, both in orange jumpsuits, both shackled. Daniel looked terrible, gaunt, hollow-eyed, like he hadn't slept in weeks. When his gaze found mine, I saw something that might have been shame flicker across his face. Jessica looked defiant. Her jaw was set, her eyes hard. She'd lost weight, her cheekbones sharp, but there was still that calculating intelligence in her expression. The judge entered, Judge Catherine Walsh, the same one who'd approved Robert's exhumation. She surveyed the courtroom with the authority of someone who'd presided over thousands of cases. All rise. The trial began with opening statements. The prosecution went first. Assistant District Attorney Michael Torres was young, maybe 40, but he had the reputation of a bulldog. He never lost. James had recommended him personally. Torres stood before the jury, 12 ordinary citizens who would decide my son's fate, and told them the story. All of it. Robert's suspicious death. Daniel's gambling debts. Jessica's criminal history. The conspiracy to have me declared incompetent. The medication tampering. The confession. Ladies and gentlemen, he concluded, this case is about greed. Pure, simple, devastating greed. These defendants murdered Richard Chun for his money. They tried to murder Margaret Chun for her money. And they would have succeeded if not for her courage, her intelligence, and her refusal to be a victim. He gestured toward me. Margaret Chun is a hero. And the defendants are exactly what they appear to be, cold-blooded killers who saw their own family as nothing more than obstacles to wealth. Then it was the defense's turn. Daniel's attorney, Marcus Fleming, was older, experienced, with silver hair and a grandfatherly manner designed to inspire trust. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard the prosecutor's version of events. Now let me tell you what really happened. Daniel Morrison is not a monster. He's a man who made terrible mistakes. A man suffering from addiction, from depression, from the crushing weight of financial pressure. Was he involved in a plan that went horribly wrong?
Yes.
Did he intend for his father to die? That's the question you'll have to answer. He painted Daniel as a victim of circumstance, a good man corrupted by addiction, and a manipulative wife. Jessica's attorney, Amanda Price, was younger, sharper, with a reputation for aggressive tactics. Jessica Kowalski is innocent, she stated flatly. She was controlled, manipulated, and coerced by Daniel Morrison. She was terrified of him. Every action she took was under duress. The prosecution wants you to believe she's a mastermind, a black widow who planned everything. The evidence will show she was just as much a victim as anyone else in this tragic case. The courthouse was packed on the first day of trial. It was January 15th, cold enough that my breath fogged as I climbed the steps. Camera crews lined the sidewalk. The case had attracted national attention. Son and wife accused of murdering father, poisoning mother for inheritance, made for sensational headlines. I wore my best suit, navy blue, tailored, professional. The same kind of suit I used to wear when I was the one prosecuting cases. James walked beside me, his hand steady on my elbow as reporters shouted questions. Mrs. Chun, how do you feel about your son being on trial? Mrs. Chun, will you be testifying? Mrs. Chun, do you think they'll be convicted? I said nothing. Just kept walking, eyes forward, until we were inside the sanctuary of the courthouse. The courtroom was beautiful in that austere way government buildings manage. Dark wood paneling, high ceilings, the seal of Virginia mounted behind the judge's bench. I took my seat in the front row of the gallery, directly behind the prosecution's table. Daniel and Jessica were led in separately, both in orange jumpsuits, both shackled. Daniel looked terrible, gaunt, hollow-eyed, like he hadn't slept in weeks. When his gaze found mine, I saw something that might have been shame flicker across his face. Jessica looked defiant.
Her jaw was set, her eyes hard.
She'd lost weight, her cheekbones sharp, but there was still that calculating intelligence in her expression. The judge entered, Judge Catherine Walsh, the same one who'd approved Robert's exhumation. She surveyed the courtroom with the authority of someone who'd presided over thousands of cases. All rise. The trial began with opening statements. The prosecution went first. Assistant District Attorney Michael Torres was young, maybe 40, but he had the reputation of a bulldog. He never lost. James had recommended him personally. Torres stood before the jury, 12 ordinary citizens who would decide my son's fate, and told them the story. All of it. Robert's suspicious death. Daniel's gambling debts. Jessica's criminal history. The conspiracy to have me declared incompetent. The medication tampering. The confession. Ladies and gentlemen, he concluded, this case is about greed. Pure, simple, devastating greed. These defendants murdered Richard Chun for his money. They tried to murder Margaret Chun for her money. And they would have succeeded if not for her courage, her intelligence, and her refusal to be a victim. He gestured toward me. Margaret Chun is a hero. And the defendants are exactly what they appear to be, cold-blooded killers who saw their own family as nothing more than obstacles to wealth. Then it was the defense's turn. Daniel's attorney, Marcus Fleming was older, experienced, with silver hair and a grandfatherly manner designed to inspire trust. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard the prosecutor's version of events. Now let me tell you what really happened. Daniel Morrison is not a monster. He's a man who made terrible mistakes. A man suffering from addiction, from depression, from the crushing weight of financial pressure. Was he involved in a plan that went horribly wrong?
Yes.
Did he intend for his father to die? That's the question you'll have to answer. He painted Daniel as a victim of circumstance, a good man corrupted by addiction, and a manipulative wife. Jessica's attorney, Amanda Price, was younger, sharper, with a reputation for aggressive tactics. Jessica Kowalski is innocent, she stated flatly. She was controlled, manipulated, and coerced by Daniel Morrison. She was terrified of him. Every action she took was under duress. The prosecution wants you to believe she's a mastermind, a black widow who planned everything. The evidence will show she was just as much a victim as anyone else in this tragic case. The prosecution rested on day 7. Torres had built a case that seemed insurmountable. Confessions, toxicology reports, financial records, recorded conversations. James had whispered to me during lunch recess that he'd never seen a more airtight prosecution. They'd be insane not to recommend a plea deal at this point, he'd said. But insanity, as I was learning, was relative. The defense began their case on day 8. Fleming called Daniel to the stand, a risky move that made James raise his eyebrows. He's going to try for sympathy, James murmured. Let Daniel tell his sob story about addiction and desperation. And that's exactly what happened. Daniel took the stand, looking broken. He'd lost at least 20 pounds since his arrest. His orange jumpsuit hung on his frame. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. Fleming walked him through his gambling addiction. The first bet, the first loss, the spiral into debt and desperation. I never meant for any of this to happen, Daniel said, tears streaming down his face. I loved my father. I love my mother. But I was drowning. I owed $400,000 to people who threatened to kill me. Viktor Sokolov sent men to my house. They showed me pictures of Tyler. They said if I didn't pay. He broke down completely, sobbing into his hands. Several jurors looked sympathetic. I felt sick. Daniel, Fleming said gently, whose idea was it to use digoxin? Jessica's. She said her aunt had heart pills. She said Dad would just go to sleep, that it would look natural. I didn't want to do it. I swear I didn't. But she said Victor's men would hurt Tyler if I didn't get the money. I had to protect my son. It was a masterful performance. Whether it was true or not, I couldn't tell anymore. Torres cross-examined aggressively. Mr. Morrison, you've testified that you were protecting your son. But weren't you also protecting yourself? Yes, but... And when you discovered your mother had recorded your confessions, your first instinct was to have her declared incompetent, wasn't it? To silence her? I was scared. You were caught. There's a difference. Torres pulled up the financial spreadsheets Daniel had created. These documents show months of planning, detailed calculations of your inheritance, research into conservatorship laws. This wasn't a desperate man acting on impulse. This was calculated murder. Daniel had no answer. Then Amanda Price called Jessica to the stand, and everything changed. Jessica looked different. Smaller somehow, vulnerable. She'd styled her hair simply, wore minimal makeup. When she spoke, her voice trembled. I met Daniel at his lowest point, she testified. He was desperate, suicidal. He told me Victor's men had beaten him. Showed me the bruises. I wanted to help him. And how did you help him? Price asked. I suggested we ask his father for money. A loan. But Richard refused. He said Daniel needed to face the consequences of his addiction, that he wouldn't enable him anymore. What happened then? Jessica's eyes filled with tears. Daniel became violent. He'd never been violent before, but that night, he grabbed me. He said if I didn't help him get the money, Victor's men would kill Tyler.
Kill me. Kill his mother.
He said he'd already lost his father. He wasn't losing anyone else. This was a complete fabrication, but it was compelling. Did Daniel force you to obtain the digoxin?
Yes.
He threatened me. He said if I didn't do it, if I told anyone, he'd tell the police I was responsible, that I'd go to prison for murder. I was terrified. And the plan to have Mrs. Chun declared incompetent. All Daniel's idea. He made me help. He made me plant the baby monitor. He switched the medications himself. I was too scared to say no. I wanted to scream. Every word was a lie. I'd heard them planning together, equal partners in conspiracy. But Torres's cross-examination eviscerated her. Ms. Kowalski, you've testified that you were coerced. But you have a criminal record, don't you? That was years ago. You served 2 years in Illinois for defrauding elderly people of their savings. You've used at least 3 different identities in the past decade. You've targeted vulnerable people for money your entire adult life. Isn't that true? Jessica's composure cracked. That's different. Is it? Because it seems to me that you saw Robert Chen's death as an opportunity. You saw Margaret Chen as another mark, another elderly victim to manipulate and steal from. No, I loved Daniel. You loved his potential inheritance, Torres corrected. And when Mrs. Chen proved too smart to be fooled, you tried to poison her. That wasn't Daniel acting alone. That was you, continuing your life's work of victimizing seniors for profit. Jessica had no answer. But then Price dropped her bombshell. Your Honor, the defense would like to call a witness. Tyler Morrison. The courtroom erupted. James jumped to his feet. Objection. Tyler is 6 years old. He's the defendant's child. This is completely inappropriate. But Judge Walsh looked troubled. Ms. Price, what exactly do you hope to establish with this witness? Your Honor, Tyler witnessed key events in this case. He saw interactions between his parents and his grandmother. He has information crucial to establishing the truth of what happened in that house. He's 6, James repeated. He's been through trauma. Putting him on the stand is cruel and potentially harmful. Tyler was in my custody now. He'd been staying with me, attending school, slowly adjusting. I'd done everything I could to shield him from the trial. And now they wanted to put him on the stand. In front of his parents. In front of cameras and reporters and a room full of strangers. I stood up. Your Honor. Judge Walsh raised her hand. Mrs. Chun, I understand your concern. But if the child has relevant testimony, I have to consider it. However, she looked at Price sternly, I will interview Tyler in chambers first. If I believe he's being coached, manipulated, or that testifying would cause him undue harm, I will not allow it. Is that clear? Yes, Your Honor. The judge called a recess. They brought Tyler to her chambers, just him, the judge, and a child psychologist. I waited in the hallway outside, pacing, my heart pounding. James sat on the bench, his head in his hands. This could ruin everything, he said. If Tyler says something that contradicts our case, if Price has gotten to him somehow. She hasn't, I said firmly. Tyler's been with me. He's had no contact with Jessica or Daniel's attorneys. But he's 6. 6-year-olds are suggestible. They want to please adults. If Price asks the right questions the right way. An hour passed. Then another. Finally, the chamber doors opened. Judge Walsh emerged first, her expression unreadable. Behind her came Tyler, holding the child psychologist's hand. His eyes were red. He'd been crying. When he saw me, he broke away and ran into my arms. Grandma, I had to tell the truth. You said always tell the truth. I held him tight. You did the right thing, baby. You always do the right thing. Judge Walsh addressed the courtroom. I've interviewed Tyler Morrison extensively. I'm satisfied that he has not been coached, that he understands the difference between truth and lies, and that his testimony is potentially relevant to this case. However, I'm going to take measures to protect him. The courtroom will be cleared of all non-essential personnel. No cameras. No recording devices. Only the jury, attorneys, defendants, and immediate family will be present. Is that understood? Everyone nodded. They cleared the gallery. The reporters filed out, grumbling. Within minutes, the massive courtroom felt empty, just a handful of people remaining. Tyler took the stand. He looked so small in the witness box, his feet dangling above the floor. They'd brought in a booster seat, so he could be seen clearly. Price approached him with a gentle smile.
Hi, Tyler.
Do you know who I am? Your mommy's lawyer. That's right. Tyler, I'm going to ask you some questions about your mommy and daddy and your grandma. Is that okay? He nodded, his eyes finding mine. I tried to smile reassuringly, even though my heart was breaking. Tyler, did your daddy ever hurt your grandma? I don't know. Did you ever see your daddy be mean to Grandma Margaret? Tyler's forehead wrinkled, thinking. Daddy would get mad sometimes. When Grandma forgot things. What kind of things did she forget? Like what day it was? Or she'd tell the same story twice. Daddy would roll his eyes at Mommy. Price nodded encouragingly. Did Grandma seem confused a lot? Sometimes. I felt the jury's eyes on me. This was exactly what Price wanted. Tyler confirming that I'd appeared confused, supporting the defense's narrative. But then Torres stood for cross-examination. Tyler, you said your grandma forgot things sometimes. Did she forget important things? Like your name or how to take care of you?
No.
She always remembered me. She made my favorite pancakes every Sunday. Did Grandma ever seem scared of your daddy? Tyler hesitated. I don't think so. Tyler, I'm going to ask you something very important, and I need you to think carefully. Did you ever hear your mommy and daddy talking about Grandma when they thought you couldn't hear? Tyler's eyes went wide. He looked at Jessica, then at Daniel, then back at Torres. Yes. What did you hear? They were in Daddy's old room. I was supposed to be asleep, but I heard them talking. Mommy said Grandma had too much money, and they needed it. Daddy said they had to wait until Grandma was. He struggled with the word, incompetent. That means too confused to take care of yourself. The courtroom was dead silent. Did that make you feel scared, Tyler?
Yes. I didn't want Grandma to be confused.
I love Grandma. Did you tell your grandma what you heard? Tyler nodded, tears starting to fall. One day when Mommy and Daddy were gone, I told her I heard them talking about taking her money. And Grandma hugged me and said it would be okay. That she wasn't confused. That she was just pretending. Price shot to her feet. Objection. Hearsay. Overruled. Judge Walsh said sharply. The witness is recounting a direct conversation. Continue, Mr. Torres. Tyler, Grandma told you she was pretending to be confused?
Yes.
She said Mommy and Daddy were trying to trick her, but she was tricking them back. She said sometimes grown-ups have to be smart and careful when other grown-ups are being bad. Several jurors were writing furiously. I saw two of them looking at me with something like admiration. One more question, Tyler. Do you feel safe with your grandma?
Yes.
Grandma keeps me safe. She makes sure I eat vegetables and do my homework, and she reads me stories every night. Grandma's the best. His voice broke on the last word, and he started crying in earnest. Judge Walsh immediately called for a recess. I rushed to the witness box and gathered Tyler into my arms. He clung to me, sobbing. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I didn't mean to make Mommy and Daddy mad." "You didn't do anything wrong," I whispered fiercely. "You told the truth. I'm so proud of you." Over Tyler's shoulder, I saw Jessica's face. She wasn't crying. She was staring at Tyler with pure hatred. The mask had finally fallen completely. And Daniel was looking at his son with something that might have been regret, or shame, or the dawning realization that he'd lost everything, including the love of his child. Tyler's testimony changed everything. The defense's strategy crumbled. A 6-year-old child, innocent and honest, had destroyed their carefully constructed lies with simple truth. But there was still one more witness to come, one more revelation that would finally, definitively end this nightmare. And it was a revelation even I hadn't seen coming. After Tyler's testimony, the defense had nothing left. Price tried to salvage her case by calling character witnesses, friends of Jessica who testified she'd been kind, generous, nothing like the monster the prosecution painted. But Torres demolished each one on cross-examination, revealing that none of them had known about Jessica's criminal past, her multiple identities, her history of targeting vulnerable people. Fleming called a psychiatrist who'd evaluated Daniel, who testified about gambling addiction and diminished capacity. But Torres countered with the spreadsheets, the emails, the months of detailed planning. This wasn't a man acting on impulse, Torres argued. This was a calculated scheme that required planning, patience, and deliberate action. That's not diminished capacity. That's premeditated murder. The closing arguments came on day 12. Torres went first, methodically walking the jury through every piece of evidence. The digoxin in Robert's system, the confessions on tape, the switched medications, the financial motive, Tyler's testimony about overhearing his parents' conspiracy. "Ladies and gentlemen," he concluded, "this case is tragic. A son murders his father. A grandson loses both his parents to prison. A grandmother has to testify against her own child. It's heartbreaking, but it's also clear-cut. The evidence is overwhelming. The defendants are guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy, fraud, and elder abuse. And your verdict must reflect that truth, no matter how painful it is." Fleming's closing was emotional, pleading. Daniel Morrison is not a monster. He's a man who made terrible mistakes. A man who was drowning in addiction and debt, who was threatened by violent criminals, who panicked and made the worst decision of his life. Does he deserve to spend the rest of his life in prison? That's for you to decide. But I ask you to consider. Is there room for mercy? For understanding? For rehabilitation? Price's closing painted Jessica as a victim, a woman coerced and controlled by a desperate man who'd acted out of fear rather than malice. But I could see it wasn't landing. The jury had seen the real Jessica. They'd heard her history of fraud. They'd watched her face when Tyler testified, the cold hatred in her eyes when she looked at a 6-year-old child who dared to tell the truth. Torres's rebuttal was devastating. The defense wants you to believe this was a tragedy of circumstance, that these defendants are victims of addiction, of pressure, of fear. But here's what the evidence shows. Jessica Kowalski has been victimizing elderly people for over a decade. This is what she does. This is who she is. And Daniel Morrison had months to walk away, to ask for help, to tell the truth. Instead, he murdered his father, tried to poison his mother, and traumatized his own son. These are not victims. These are perpetrators. And they must be held accountable. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. I waited in a conference room with James, Tyler, and Marcus. Tyler played with toy cars on the floor, oblivious to the gravity of what was happening down the hall. James paced. Marcus sat quietly, his old investigator's calm still intact. 8 hours is a long time, I said. Is that bad? Not necessarily, James replied. It's a complicated case with multiple charges. They're probably going through everything methodically. At 4:30 p.m., we got the call. The jury had reached a verdict. We filed back into the courtroom. Daniel and Jessica were brought in, both pale, both silent. The gallery had filled again, reporters, curious onlookers, a few of Robert's old friends who'd been following the trial. Judge Walsh entered. Has the jury reached a verdict? The forewoman stood, a black woman in her 50s, a schoolteacher according to jury selection. We have, Your Honor.
What say you?
In the case of the Commonwealth of Virginia versus Daniel Morrison, on the charge of first-degree murder of Richard Chen, we find the defendant guilty. Daniel's head dropped to the table.
I heard him sob.
On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of elder abuse and medication tampering, we find the defendant guilty. The forewoman continued through every charge.
Guilty. Guilty. Guilty.
Then it was Jessica's turn. In the case of the Commonwealth of Virginia versus Jessica Kowalski, on the charge of first-degree murder of Richard Chen, we find the defendant guilty. Jessica showed no emotion, just stared straight ahead, her jaw set. On all charges, we find the defendant guilty. Judge Walsh banged her gavel. The defendants will be remanded into custody pending sentencing. Sentencing hearing will be scheduled for 3 weeks from today. This court is adjourned. As they led Daniel away in handcuffs, he turned to look at me one last time. Mom, he called out, his voice breaking. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even sadness. Just emptiness. Goodbye, Daniel, I said quietly. They took him away. Then Jessica, who never looked back, never said a word. Tyler tugged on my sleeve. Grandma? Is it over? Yes, baby. It's over. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. James gave a brief statement praising the jury, thanking the prosecutor's office, talking about justice for Robert. A reporter pushed a microphone toward me. Mrs. Chen, how do you feel about your son's conviction? I looked directly into the camera. I feel that justice was served. My son made choices, terrible choices, that cost my husband his life and nearly cost me mine. He must face the consequences of those choices. That's what justice means. Will you attend the sentencing hearing?
Yes.
I'll be there when they sentence both of them, and I'll be there to make sure they receive the maximum penalty allowed by law. Do you have any message for other families dealing with elder abuse? I thought about that question carefully. Don't be silent. Don't accept abuse from anyone, even family, even your own children. And trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, investigate. Document everything. Fight back. You're never too old to fight for yourself. That night, Tyler and I went home to the house where Robert had died, where Daniel had plotted against me, where so much pain had been inflicted. But it didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt peaceful. I made Tyler's favorite dinner, chicken nuggets and mac and cheese. We ate at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd confronted Daniel and Jessica months ago. Grandma? Tyler said through a mouthful of mac and cheese. Are you sad that Daddy's going to jail? I thought about that. Was I sad? Angry? Relieved? I'm sad about what he did, I said carefully. I'm sad that he threw away his life, that he hurt people, that he destroyed our family. But I'm not sad that he's being held accountable. Does that make sense? Tyler nodded slowly. I think so. I miss him sometimes. The old him. Before he got mean. Me too, baby. Me too. After Tyler went to bed, I sat in Robert's study. His reading glasses were still on the desk. His unfinished crossword puzzle from the day he died. I'd kept everything exactly as it was, like a shrine. But it was time to let go. I packed up his belongings slowly, methodically. His clothes for donation. His books for the library. His papers to be shredded or filed. And at the bottom of his desk drawer, I found an envelope addressed to me in his handwriting, dated 2 days before he died. My hands trembled as I opened it. My dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. I hope I'm being paranoid, but I've learned to trust my instincts in 67 years of life. I've discovered that Daniel is in serious trouble. Gambling debts, dangerous people. He asked me for money, $400,000. I refused. I love our son, but I cannot enable his destruction. I've changed my will. Everything goes to you now, with only a small monthly stipend for Daniel until he gets treatment for his addiction. I know he'll be angry. I know Jessica will be furious. She's not who he thought she was, Margaret. I've been investigating. She has a criminal history. She's conned people before. I'm worried about what they might do.
I'm worried about you.
If anything happens to me, please be careful. Daniel is our son, but he's also desperate, and desperate people do terrible things. I love you, Margaret. I've loved you for 43 years. You gave up your career for our family, and I've never thanked you enough for that sacrifice. You were magnificent in that courtroom, and you've been magnificent as my wife and Daniel's mother. If something happens to me, don't grieve for long.
Live.
Be happy. And if you need to, bring out the Iron Lotus one more time. Fight for yourself the way you used to fight for justice. All my love always, Robert. I held the letter to my chest and finally, allowed myself to cry. Not for Daniel. Not for the son I'd lost. But for Robert. For the man who'd loved me, who'd seen danger coming and tried to warn me, who'd believed in me even when I'd forgotten how to believe in myself. I did it. I whispered to the empty room. I fought back.
Just like you said.
I brought out the Iron Lotus one more time. And I imagined, maybe I was crazy, but I imagined I could hear Robert's voice in the darkness. I knew you would, my love. I always knew. The sentencing was 3 weeks away. But that night, for the first time in 8 months, I slept peacefully. Justice had been served. My husband had been avenged. And Tyler, innocent, beautiful Tyler, was safe. Everything else could wait until morning. The sentencing hearing was February 14th, Valentine's Day. The irony wasn't lost on me. I dressed in black, for mourning, for closure, for the death of the family I'd once believed in. Tyler stayed home with Eloise, who'd become like a second grandmother to him. He didn't need to see this part. The courtroom was packed again, every seat filled. Daniel and Jessica were brought in separately, both wearing the same orange jumpsuits they'd worn throughout the trial. Daniel looked worse than ever, skeletal, haunted. He'd been in protective custody at the county jail, kept separate from the general population. I'd heard from James that he'd attempted suicide 2 weeks ago, swallowing a stockpile of sleeping pills he'd somehow acquired. They'd found him in time, pumped his stomach, put him on suicide watch.
Part of me wondered if I should feel something about that.
Grief, maybe, or concern. But I felt nothing. The son I'd raised was already dead, killed by greed and desperation and his own terrible choices. Jessica showed no such weakness. She sat straight-backed, defiant, her eyes cold. She'd given an interview from jail, against her lawyer's advice, claiming she was innocent, that this was all a miscarriage of justice, that someday the truth would come out. Judge Walsh entered, and the courtroom rose.
"Be seated," she said.
Her expression was granite. We're here today for sentencing in the matter of Commonwealth versus Morrison and Commonwealth versus Kowalski. Before I impose sentence, I'm going to allow victim impact statements. Mrs. Chen, would you like to address the court? I stood, walked to the podium, faced Daniel and Jessica directly. For a long moment, I said nothing, just looked at them. These two people who'd destroyed my family, who'd murdered my husband, who'd tried to destroy me. Then I began. Your Honor, my name is Margaret Chen. I'm 70 years old. 8 months ago, I was a grieving widow trying to process the sudden death of my husband. I thought I had the support of my son. I thought I had a family who loved me. I was wrong. I pulled out the letter Robert had written, the one I'd found in his desk. This is a letter from my late husband, written 2 days before he was murdered. In it, he expresses concern about what Daniel and Jessica might do. He warns me to be careful. He tells me to fight back if anything happens to him. I looked at Daniel. Your father knew. He knew you were in trouble. He knew Jessica was dangerous. And he changed his will to protect me, which is why you killed him. Daniel's shoulders shook. He was crying silently. You murdered the man who gave you life. The man who taught you to ride a bike, who paid for your education, who loved you unconditionally. You murdered him for money. $400,000 in debts versus the man who raised you. And you chose the money. I turned to Jessica. And you're a predator. You've spent your adult life targeting vulnerable people. You saw my family as your next mark. You manipulated my son, exploited his weaknesses, and helped him commit murder. Then you tried to finish the job by poisoning me and stealing everything my husband and I worked for. Jessica met my eyes with pure hatred. No remorse. No shame. Just cold, calculating malice. Your Honor, I continued, I stand here today not as a victim, but as a survivor. I fought back. I investigated. I gathered evidence. I brought these criminals to justice. And now I ask that you impose the maximum sentence allowed by law. They showed no mercy to my husband. They deserve none in return. I folded the letter carefully. Robert was 67 when he died. We should have had 20 more years together. Retirement, grandchildren, growing old in the house we built together. Daniel and Jessica stole that from us. They stole a husband, a father, a grandfather. And for what? Money they'll never get to spend because they'll be in prison for the rest of their lives. I looked at Judge Walsh. I want them to have time to think about what they did. Years and years to reflect on how they destroyed everything, their family, their freedom, their souls for greed. That's the justice my husband deserves. That's the justice I demand. I sat down. James squeezed my hand. Torres stood next. Your Honor, the Commonwealth recommends life in prison without possibility of parole for both defendants. This was premeditated, cold-blooded murder combined with a systematic campaign of fraud and elder abuse. These are dangerous individuals who will reoffend if ever released. Fleming tried one last time to save Daniel. Your Honor, my client has shown genuine remorse. He attempted to take his own life out of guilt and shame. He's not a career criminal like Ms. Kowalski. He was a man who made terrible mistakes under extreme pressure. The Commonwealth recommends life without parole, but I ask the court to consider life with a possibility of parole after 30 years. To give him hope. To give him a chance at redemption. Price stood for Jessica. Your Honor, my client maintains her innocence. She believes this verdict was unjust. However, if the court is determined to impose a sentence, we ask for leniency. Ms. Kowalski is young, only 32 years old. Life without parole is essentially a death sentence. We ask for life with possibility of parole after 25 years. Judge Walsh was silent for a long time. She looked at her notes, looked at Daniel and Jessica, looked at me. Then she spoke. I've presided over criminal cases for 32 years. I've seen murders motivated by rage, by passion, by mental illness. But this case is different. This was murder motivated by pure greed. Cold, calculated, premeditated greed. She looked directly at Daniel. Mr. Morrison, you had every advantage in life. Loving parents, a good education, opportunities. And you threw it all away. You murdered your own father, the man who gave you life, for money. You traumatized your son. You betrayed your mother. And when you were caught, you tried to shift blame, to claim you were a victim of circumstance. You're not a victim. You're a murderer. Daniel was openly weeping now, his whole body shaking. Ms. Kowalski, the judge continued, turning to Jessica, you're a career criminal who spent your adult life victimizing vulnerable people. You targeted the Chin family deliberately. You manipulated Daniel Morrison. You helped murder Richard Chin. You conspired to defraud and poison Margaret Chin. You showed no remorse during this trial, only contempt for the legal process and hatred toward your victims. Judge Walsh picked up her gavel. On the charge of first-degree murder, I sentence both defendants to life in prison without possibility of parole. On all other charges, I impose the maximum sentence allowed by law to run concurrently with the life sentence. You will both die in prison. That is the will of this court and the just outcome for your crimes. The gavel fell. Daniel collapsed forward, his head on the defense table, sobbing uncontrollably. Jessica remained motionless. Then, as they moved to take her away, she turned to me one last time. This isn't over, she hissed. I'll appeal. I'll fight this. Someday I'll get out, and when I do, you won't, I said calmly. The evidence is ironclad. The verdict is just. You're going to die in prison, Jessica. And every day you spend there, you'll remember that you were beaten by a 70-year-old widow you thought was senile. That must really sting. Her face contorted with rage, but the guards pulled her away before she could respond. Daniel didn't look at me as they let him out, just kept his head down, broken and defeated. And I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No revenge. Just a tired sort of peace. Outside, the reporters were waiting. James gave another statement. I added only this. Justice was served today. Not revenge, justice. There's a difference. My husband can rest in peace now, and I can begin to heal. What's next for you, Mrs. Chin? I thought about that. What was next? Tyler was in my custody permanently now. I had a 6-year-old to raise, a house to manage, a life to rebuild. And I had something else, a purpose. I'm starting a foundation, I said. The Richard Chin Foundation for Elder Justice. It will provide legal support for elderly people facing financial abuse, conservatorship fraud, or exploitation by family members. Because what happened to me happens every day to people who don't have my resources or experience. People who are silenced, victimized, and stripped of their dignity by the people who should protect them. Will you practice law again? I smiled. I'm 70 years old. I've been out of practice for 40 years. But I can consult. I can advise. I can use my experience to help others fight back. The Iron Lotus may be retired, but she's not dead. That night, Tyler and I had dinner at Robert's favorite restaurant, a little Italian place where we'd celebrated anniversaries and birthdays for decades. Tyler ordered spaghetti and made a mess, sauce everywhere. I didn't care. I just watched him laugh, watched him be a normal 6-year-old kid, and felt grateful. Grandma, he said, twirling pasta on his fork. Are we going to be okay?
Yes, sweetheart.
We're going to be okay. Even without Daddy? I reached across the table and took his hand. Your daddy made bad choices. But that doesn't mean you will. You're a good boy, Tyler. You're honest and brave and kind. You're going to grow up to be a wonderful man, nothing like what your father became. How do you know? Because I'm going to make sure of it. And because you have your grandfather's heart. He was a good man. You'll be like him. Tyler smiled, sauce on his chin. I wish I remembered Grandpa better. I'll tell you about him. Every day, I'll tell you stories. And he'll live on through you. We finished dinner.
Went home.
I tucked Tyler into bed. His room, the one I'd created for him in what used to be Daniel's childhood bedroom. Grandma, he said sleepily, I love you. I love you too, baby. So much. I turned off the light and went downstairs. Poured myself a glass of Robert's favorite whiskey. Sat in his chair in the study. The house was quiet, peaceful. The shadows that had haunted it were finally gone. I raised my glass to the empty room. We won, Robert. Justice was served. And Tyler's safe. I'll raise him right, I promise. I'll make sure he becomes the man you wanted Daniel to be. In the silence, I could almost hear Robert's voice. I know you will, my love.
You always do what's right.
I smiled, sipped my whiskey, and felt, finally, truly at peace. 3 years later, the Richard Chin Foundation had helped 17 elderly victims of financial abuse. We'd won 12 court cases, prevented 9 fraudulent conservatorship, and recovered over $4 million in stolen assets. Tyler was 9 now. Happy, well-adjusted, thriving in school. He called me Mom sometimes instead of Grandma, and I didn't correct him. I was his mother now in every way that mattered. Daniel sent letters from prison, dozens of them, all unopened. I kept them in a box in the attic. Maybe someday Tyler would want to read them. Maybe someday he'd want to understand his father. But that was his choice to make when he was older. Jessica never wrote. She'd exhausted her appeals. The Virginia Supreme Court had upheld her conviction unanimously. She'd spend the rest of her life in a maximum security facility, exactly as she deserved. On the 3rd anniversary of Robert's death, Tyler and I visited his grave. We brought flowers, yellow roses, his favorite. Tyler placed the flowers carefully.
Hi, Grandpa.
I got an A on my science project, and I made the soccer team. Grandma says you'd be proud. I stood behind him, my hand on his shoulder. He would be. He is. We stood there in comfortable silence for a while. Then Tyler looked up at me. Grandma, do you think people can be forgiven? For bad things they've done? That depends, I said carefully, on whether they're truly sorry, whether they've changed, and whether the people they hurt are willing to forgive. Will you ever forgive Daddy? I thought about that. Honestly, I don't know, Tyler. Maybe someday. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean what he did was okay. It just means letting go of anger, so it doesn't poison your own heart. Have you let go? I looked at Robert's headstone, then at Tyler's innocent face. Yes, I said. I have. Not for your father's sake, but for mine. And for yours. Because we have a life to live, and we can't live it while clinging to hate. Tyler hugged me. You're the strongest person I know, Grandma. I laughed. I'm just a stubborn old woman who refused to be a victim. No, he said seriously. You're Iron Lotus. Dad's prison letters. I looked at one.
He called you that.
What does it mean? I knelt down to his level. It's what people used to call me when I was a lawyer. The lotus flower grows in mud, but it blooms clean and beautiful. Iron means strong, unbreakable. Together, it means someone who can survive dark times and come out beautiful and strong. That's you. Tyler said. You survived. And you saved me too. We walked back to the car hand in hand. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Beautiful. I'd lost a husband. I'd lost a son. Not to death, but to something worse. But I'd gained something too. Purpose.
Peace.
A second chance to raise a child the right way. The iron lotus had bloomed one final time. And this time, the beauty that emerged from the mud would last. Because justice isn't just about punishing the guilty. It's about protecting the innocent, standing up for truth, and refusing to let evil win. I'd spent 12 years of my life fighting for that principle in courtrooms. And when it mattered most, when my own family became my adversaries, I'd remembered who I was. Not just Daniel's mother. Not just Robert's widow. But Margaret Chen, the woman who never backed down from a fight. The woman who proved that it's never too late to be strong. The woman who showed that age is just a number when you have truth on your side and fire in your heart.